thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure to be on your show. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
No worries. Congrats on the book, Closer by Sea, by Perry Chafe.
Oh, that's awesome, Green. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I can't remember ever reading a book about a different place, a place that I was unfamiliar with. Actually, let me say that again. Unfamiliar with, although it's still being in Canada, right? I've read books that are based all over the world, maybe, or different parts of the world, but never a book based at home in a place that was very unfamiliar. And it was very interesting to read not just the story you were telling, but to read everything else around that. So that was fascinating. So thank you you for that.
Thank you. I feel privileged that you would say that. That means it was a unique story, and coming from you, that means a lot. So thank you for that.
Now I think you say it at the end here, in your comments and stuff. 10 years to write this book?
Oh no, I was asked 10 years ago to think about writing a book.
Okay.
And I finally got around to it about 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
And during COVID, the wonderful editor, Nita Provenost, who's now a best-selling author under the name Nita Prose, who wrote an incredible novel called The Maid, was my editor at Simon & Schuster.
Okay.
And I met her through a mutual friend of mine named Alan Doyle, who's a musician who was doing some books. He's a wonderful musician and writer. And we got to talking, and she said, I think there might be a book in you. And then 10 years later, I finally get to it. And here it is today. So she just kept at me in a most wonderful way. She believed in me.
So 10 years ago, when Nina says there's a book in you, what kind of a book was she thinking about? What kind of a book or story were you thinking about?
Oh, that's interesting, Grim. So it's similar to what you've said. She was thinking of this place because she'd been here with Alan. Okay. She's originally from Toronto. And she just felt this place was so unique for everything you touched on, a unique setting that, not a lot of people know about. So she thought the setting was wonderful. And she thought, given my background in storytelling through television, she thought I could tell a story and a kind of a coming of age tale based in Newfoundland. Around similar to what my experience growing up here. That's where it started. That was the nugget that she sort of put out there. And then from there, this book came. That was the origin.
So when you grew up there, did you grow up during that time where the fisheries were suffering and the government, snap of a finger, said, let's shut her down? Was that you lived in during that time?
Absolutely. And the book is set. I lived. I grew up in the 70s and 80s in this small fishing community. Petty Harbour, Newfoundland is my hometown. And so the setting, it takes place on a small island. It's a fictitious island, but basically it's like if Petty Harbour was an island, that's where the fishery happened. So absolutely, my parents, my father was a fisherman, my mother was a fish plant worker, and everything stopped in 1992 with the moratorium. And that was the end of the cod fishery. It was supposed to be a temporary measure, but, a couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years, we're going out over 30. So 2022 marked the 30th year of this moratorium, and some 30,000 Newfoundlander and Labradorians found themselves out of work, just like that, stroke of the pen.
Wow. I need to ask you this question, Perry. Outside of Nina planting that seed, seeing your friend Alan write a successful book, you're known Republic of Doyle, son of a Critch. Mm-hmm. You have to. I must apologize. I can't remember your partner's name, but you've written songs with her or for her.
Green Ennis. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. How I know there was a pandemic and a lot of people tried a lot of new things. I tried my hand at baking sourdough bread, like a bunch of other people. You said, "Oh, let me write a story, a book."
Mhm.
But outside of that, like what? Why did you want to attempt to write a novel? Like, is it the same muscles, same memory, same energy that it takes to write television shows?
Sort of, yes. I sort of adapted my skill set that I had developed for telling, you know, television and film stories, and adapted it for telling a novel, using it, to write a novel. So the skill sets are similar, but what I found much different in a novel, I wanted to. It's just so much longer. It's 270 pages. If I'm writing a half-hour comedy, it's 24, pages. If I'm writing a drama like Republic of Doyle, it's 54. Or sorry, 48 or 50 pages. This world was much bigger. Was also I found it interesting because in my other world, it's so much more collaborative. You have a wonderful writing team usually that you break story with for film and television, certainly in the television world. And somebody goes away and writes that particular episode of television, and then you put it in the production machine, and out comes a television show. It happens, and I don't have the luxury of time in that world, but I do have the luxury of having some great writers that we can break story. With telling the novel, with creating a novel, you're sort of on an island, pardon the pun, on your own. With a great editor like Nina Provenos and Janie Yoon, were two wonderful editors I work with, but you're pretty much on your own to, creating your own story. So I had some skill set in that area, but what I found the challenging part was sort of doing it on my own and using that descriptive nature, just the amount of description that goes into a book as opposed to a screenplay. In the screenplay you slug it, fish plant, and that's fine. That you and your location team go find a fish plant, and you'll see it on the screen. In the book, I spent 2-3 pages talking about what a fish plant looked like, what it smelled like, the activity around a fish plant. So I did have some skill sets, luckily, in the other world that I live in, and I was able to adapt a lot of them, in creating a novel. But there was also some learning curve that I had to get used to.
Wow, fantastic. I want you to complete this sentence, if you would. And this is something that you've said. When I was 18, I moved out of Petty Harbor and into a house with Alan Doyle on Suez Street in St. John's.
Oh, you've done your research, sir. That's incredible. And we went to university together, and we began to continue to develop our storytelling abilities and skill sets. We sort of honed them together. He in the world of music, of course, with Great Big Sea, and I went on, eventually to create film and television, and now dabbling in the world of the novel. So. Yeah, so we were great friends, grew up together, and that's so funny that I don't know where you got that to, but great research.
Thank you. What was fascinating is as well as during my research, I've interviewed a number of authors, and some authors have had great book launches, very interesting book launches. Yours was, you literally had a Canadian rock star, Alan Doyle, perform at your book launch. Very, very interesting book launch for sure. What's the fisheries industry like now in Newfoundland? Has it come back? Is it thriving? What's happening there?
No, unfortunately, there's still a cod moratorium some 30 years later. There is, although there is a fishery that's happening. So every summer for so many weeks, people can go, Newfoundland and Labradorians can go in boats and collect 5 fish a day over that particular span of time for I think it's 3 days a week over a number of weeks. So you can still, experience it. But as far as an active, full-fledged fishery that was pre-1992, it doesn't exist. Now they've pivoted a little, and now we're doing things like crab. there's an active crab industry here and other at the time underutilized species. But as far as that, the stories about the codfish and that world, unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. When I finished reading the book last week, it occurred to me that maybe the point of the story wasn't necessarily about the main character, but it was about the town itself, and maybe it was a story to Newfoundlanders, people that stayed behind, that continued to build whatever it is that they wanted to build or tried to build. Because you end off, to me, it seems the story ended off on a happy note. It's like a roller coaster. There's a lot of ups and downs in the book, but it ended off, to me, saying a town that was devastated has found a way to flourish again. Your thoughts on that?
No, that's very intuitive, and that's exactly how I wanted to finish the book, because it's an homage to a people that have survived.
Yeah.
We've been here 500 years, and that was such a pivotal time in our history, the closure of the cod fishery. I don't know how we survived it, and looking back, it's just the people, just refused to give up, and they did other things. So in the book, I talk about towns like like Petty Harbor, Newfoundland. It changed as well. So it started to focus a bit on the crab fishery, but also it became sort of a tourism industry started to flourish. And we have a wonderful restaurant there called Chafe's Landing, and there's an ice cream store, and there is an aquarium, and a little cafe right on the water. And they're actually talking about a microbrewery. So everything I talk about in the book is in that town. And a lot of towns were able to do that. Some weren't able to do that, but a lot of them were, just because of people, the ingenuity of and the spirit of a people, refusing to give up, were able to. So I wanted to leave the book on a high note, going, we're still here, we're doing great. It makes us stronger in many ways, and I'm so proud of this place because we're able to do that.
That's awesome. Now, is that a family place, the ice cream store? With your name?
Chafe's Landing, I believe we're distant cousins, but I might get 10% off if I mention their name. So I've got to call them tomorrow. They're a wonderful restaurant, but it's a wonderful town. Newfoundland's wonderful, so invite everybody to come visit. Yeah,
my friend works for a spirits company, and he was just down there a couple of weeks ago, and he did that. Well, you kiss the fish. What is that? What is that ceremony called?
Yeah, we call it a screech-in. So you become an honorary.
He got screeched in, yes.
Oh, so he's an honorary Newfoundlander and Labradorian.
Yeah, he had a great time there.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, there's a wonderful screech-in program ceremony where you kiss a cod and drink some screech rum, and you become a Newfoundlander. Yeah. You have to say there's something you have to say as well with that, and you become an honorary Newfoundlander.
Nice. You talked about your dad and your mom. Your dad was a fisherman. Your mom worked in a fish plant. How did they adapt to what was happening when 30 years ago things shut down?
Well, my parents at the time were older, so they were, late 50s, early 60s, so they took an early retirement. Although my brothers and sisters couldn't, they were all involved one way or the other in the fishery, so they ended up going back to school and being retrained, and eventually finding jobs, like a lot of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians had to do. So, but even looking back on that, some of the some fishermen and fisher people and fish plant workers, they were in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s going back to be retrained after being out of school for 30, 40, 50 years. How incredible, how frightening and is that, but yet they did that, or they went and did something else slightly, maybe related or unrelated to fishery. But, the courage to be able to do that, I always find fascinating, to go back. Even going from high school to university, I thought was frightening, but imagine being out of school for 30, 40 years, going back to be retrained. that must have been seemed like a mountain to climb for them, but people did it.
Wow. And what did your siblings study? Like what sort of jobs did
Oh
they
yeah,
be trained
my
for?
my sister, she ended up going back and getting her master's in psychology,
Oh wow.
and which was wonderful because she's my another brother studied accounting, and another brother went and did IT. So they were able
Okay.
to get some training and so on, like a lot did. Others retired, and unfortunately, with all of that comes a bit of a loss in passing things on from generation to generation.
Hmm.
So we're getting to the point now that I think some are doing a great job of carrying on tradition, especially with tourism and in some of these small towns. There's actually community museums and people who are dedicated, like in Petty Harbor, to sort of keeping that tradition going. But unfortunately, the infrastructure has fallen. The fish plants are no longer there for codfish. And the knowledge of things like catching a fish or even building a boat, unfortunately, gets, as generations move away from the past, we tend to lose a little bit of that, which is
Yeah.
sad. And I talk about that in the book as well.
Wow. What makes Newfoundland a place that to me continues to churn out people in the entertainment, storytelling, comedy space? It's like so and so's from Newfoundland, so and so's like we're like such a small, like large space, but
Mm-hmm.
small population, but a tradition of making people laugh, it seems,
Yeah.
and dance through music. What is it about your home?
That's such a great question that it's a special place, but like it's a large with regards to geography, it's a
Yeah,
large space, especially
yeah.
with Newfoundland and Labrador. However, there's only 500, less, it's 500,000 people here.
Wow.
Yet it's crazy. And you look at, like you were saying, the artistic talent that comes out of this place. And I think it has to do with the nature of the isolation of living on an island or an isolated community, where over the years, you had to entertain yourself. So you start playing music and you tell stories and tall tales, or you dance, or you paint. So I think that tradition began with just the idea that we need to entertain yourself. It's a wonderful place, but it's difficult sometimes to get there, especially in the past. So
Yeah.
I think it's sort of the origins came from this sense of isolation and developing a unique culture. And I think, looking back at some of the best storytellers I've ever, even today, that I've ever heard, are fishermen and fish plant workers and fisher people who are telling tall tales down by the stages. And myself and Alan Doyle, we grew up listening to those fishermen, and
Wow.
workers and so on. So and just here and they were also singers, and they told recitations, just stories by heart that had a rhyme scheme to it. It was like, oh my God, this is incredible. That was in a town of 1,000 people. So, and every town had that, those storytellers and those singers and dancers and painters. So I think it's just this sense of the isolation and the oral tradition, perhaps, that came over from the Irish, because we're heavily influenced
Yeah.
by that. But I really believe it's the isolation and that sort of helped brew this sort of storytelling tradition.
Wow. What's next for Closer by the Sea? You're known as a TV writer, producer, creator. Is there a mini series that's in here?
I'd like to think there is. I think there's either a film, or I would love
Okay.
to see, as you mentioned, a mini series in order to do it justice. That's why I didn't write it's not a feature, but I thought I could do justice to creating a world, especially if my home. So I had to get it right. And so I wanted, for family and friends, I wanted to do this properly. So I do believe there's a mini series there, and I think in sort of the perhaps in the same path of the Stand By Me, or the Stephen
Yeah.
King, the novella he wrote, The Body. Maybe something along the lines of that would be set in Newfoundland with that unique spin to it. I think would be quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see your story come alive on a screen.
Absolutely.
Perry Chafe, The book is Closer by Sea, published by Simon & Schuster. Fantastic story. Thank you so much for writing this. Thank you for telling stories on the screen that Canadians enjoy, and thank you for spending some time with me today.
Oh, a pleasure, Kareem. I can't thank you enough for giving me the opportunity. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Fantastic. Go buy the book, people. Closer by Sea. Again, my guest has been Perry Chafe. Anywhere you buy your books, whether online or in your local bookstore, pick it up there. Again, thank you so much, Perry.
Thank you, Kareem.
Okay, that was great. Thank you.
You're excellent. Oh my God, what an interview! You did your research, sir. That was like, wow, that quote was excellent.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.